of us dance with dysfunction in our relationships, and we start calling things that are dysfunctional normal because we've just lived in it for so long, right? Even from creating the foundations of the world, God used boundaries. And so when we start to act like we are unlimited in our capacity, then we start acting like God. We are limited. If I am giving level 10 access to someone who is not demonstrating level 10 responsibility, maybe they're only demonstrating level 3 responsibility, right? The distance between the access that I'm granting them and the responsibility that they are demonstrating, that distance right there, that is where dysfunction grows. Boundaries, what they really are, is a way to bring the conversation back to the middle to avoid those extremes. Never forget, Jesus laid down his one life for a high and holy purpose. Jesus did not lay down his life to enable bad behavior to continue. We will always desperately want from other people what we fear our God will not provide. Never take your eyes off the master.
Wow, wow, wow.
I was about to hit the wow, wow, wow.
Wow, wow, wow. Wow, wow, wow.
Yeah. Where do you want to start?
Man.
Where do we go? Where do we go from here?
I don't know if you can feel the nervousness through the camera right now, but there's a little bit of nervousness going on. We do CoffeeFam all the time, but when you start talking about boundaries,
feelings. Not too much.
start getting into the feelings.
There's this like running thing, like almost like a running joke of like, there's some weeks where you kind of don't want to be invited to CoffeeFam.
I mean, that's true.
Because I don't know if I'm ready to process with all of y'all. I love y'all, but I don't know if I'm ready to process with y'all because it's a lot.
And if you get invited, you're like, did I do something wrong?
It's like, yeah, it's like, how do we talk about this? Where do we begin?
I was excited to be on CoffeeFam today until she told us the title. Boundaries, I was like, oh, I'm with that.
Yeah.
Then she hit us with the subtitle, Dancing with Dysfunction.
Yeah. Dysfunction.
And I was like, I might need to take some PTO on Wednesday.
Okay.
Here's what I want you to do. I want you to put in the chat today what some of your biggest takeaways were. What is something, if you watch the message today, what is something that God spoke directly to you through this? And I want you to put in the chat maybe some questions you have. Maybe you heard something that you're still trying to process.
Yeah.
Stephanie Esposito is our boundaries expert, so she's going to answer all of your questions and get everything you need straight. She does this for a living. This is what she does.
Get out of here.
She really helped Lisa with the notes when she was working on this sermon.
No, I listened. I do Audible, so I listened to her book, Good Boundaries and Goodbyes, and it is excellent.
It's so good.
And the thing that I love about this sermon and the book and just Lisa in general is that she really roots everything in the Word of God.
Yes.
And she went all the way back to in the beginning.
Yes.
And how like there's a separation between the land and the sea, between the sky and the earth, right? And so boundaries were God's idea. Boundaries keep you safe, but also at the same time, I think when you put it on humanity, you have to realize, we were talking about this a little bit as we were waiting for things to start this morning, that this could be a tool or a weapon.
That's right.
And it depends on whose hands it's in.
That's right.
Because I think the first thing that I had to do in listening to her book and then in going back and listening to the sermon is, God, am I healed in all the areas that I need to be healed?
Right.
Or am I building unnecessary walls so that I don't have to deal with something because I don't trust God with it in the first place? And so that to me is the preface to this sermon and to the book and all of that, is like finding my own healing first. And then drawing an appropriate boundary of like, okay, well, you're not gonna mess up my sandcastle again, right? Like I built it back up. And now I protect it.
That's right.
I love it. I love it. Something that Will said that I love, you mentioned like, hey, like if there's a part of the sermon that maybe you're still challenged by, a part that maybe you're still confused by. About 2 weeks ago, I was talking to someone who's EFM over the phone. They're like, I just love how you guys kind of like, have everything processed, and how you guys just think about it's like, processed? We're still processing too, you know what I mean? And so I love what you said, because like, let's process together.
Absolutely.
Because something like this, especially when it comes to boundaries, it's so nuanced. I think it's important. I love same thing what you said, Steph, about just even like a sermon like this, you really need to hear with the level, like hear by the Spirit and have a level of discernment. Because there's, so many different parts of it in the sermon where I was like, I also need to really discern and know what is this dysfunction to begin with.
Exactly.
Like I have to know, like, what are some of those areas?
Right. Well, when you're sitting in it, it feels normal, especially if it's not your fault, but that's just all you've ever known.
So I wanted
that's
to
all
ask
you've
this
ever
question
seen.
to y'all, and I'm not going to answer.
That's all you know. It's a good one.
Here's something I thought about when I was listening to the sermon on Sunday. There is a difference between dysfunction and malfunction.
Oh.
And I think the malfunctions for us are so much easier. Because something is not working the way it is supposed to work. Something is not doing what it's supposed to do. But oftentimes I have described dysfunction as driving around in your car with the check engine light on.
Right.
My engine is not malfunctioning. If it was malfunctioning, I wouldn't be able to get anywhere.
Right.
But I'm so used to the check engine light being on in my car, I don't even see it anymore until my wife gets in and is like, your check engine light is on.
Right.
And I'm like, oh man. I think the malfunctions people don't need help with.
Right.
The malfunctions is obvious.
Yes.
It shuts you down.
It shuts you down.
Yeah.
I think maybe, I'd love to hear from each of you, maybe 30 seconds. What tool have you used? What has been super helpful for you in your own personal life to help you discern the dysfunctions? The malfunctions have made you shut down. That part, I think I don't think we need to spend a ton of time on that. But the dysfunctions are sometimes more difficult to even notice in the beginning. What has been helpful for you in your personal life to learn, to understand, to see the dysfunctions?
That's such great language, Will. I think that part of even like being able to delineate between the two is when I see the malfunctions and I procrastinate or I ignore them, that is dysfunction. Because oftentimes a lot of the malfunctions in my life aren't even things that I can control. Let's just be honest.
Absolutely.
There's things that happen, you know what I mean? Things that are, again, outside of my control. But when I don't take the time to address them, to give someone, Lysa spoke about access.
That's right.
To call a mechanic, you know what I mean?
That's right.
So like, again, check engine light, right? Sometimes our souls have that check engine light.
Right.
And things that happen, things that maybe someone did to you, you know what I'm saying? But when I constantly just, you know what I mean? For me, just to be super vulnerable, I just get busy. And then that turns into procrastination. I'm just gonna, work and just, kind of get, busy and all that stuff. And then I procrastinate some of the things that are broken. That is really the dysfunction. And I start dancing with, some of the things that I need to fix. And so being able to know some of those things and delineate between the two has helped me a lot. So.
How have you just noticed the dysfunctions in your life?
I think it's how I feel after a certain feeling or encounter I have with someone.
Okay.
So a lot of times, and this is why I really didn't want to talk about this, because Lysa was all up in my business. Anger is my first emotion.
Okay.
And so when I'm coming out of a conversation, and I ain't gonna throw no one on flash just in case someone's watching, but if I am angry, I'm like, okay, this is probably some dysfunction because you're bringing this emotion out of me, which really isn't actually anger, it's actually sadness or disappointment. So I think recognizing those feelings, recognizing this constant feeling of anger or sadness, that's how I navigate it.
Awesome.
So I think, first of all, I love your metaphor. I love a good metaphor, so I'm totally into this car thing. So I think it's who you let in the front seat. I think for me,
that's good.
Who I have,
let's talk about that. That's fantastic.
Right? Because
I love it.
You want to take a look at who you're spending time with and who you're giving access to. And Lysa even said that, that access without accountability is detrimental. It can lead to feelings of abandonment. It's like when someone's in your front seat and they don't point out, hey, your check engine light is on, and every time you hit the brakes, it sounds like somebody's grinding their teeth, then they don't care about what happens to you in that vehicle. I want people in my front seat who care about the health of the vehicle and the ones driving it and the ones in the back seat of it. And so I think intentionality with who you spend your time with. I have a couple, just 2 or 3 girlfriends that are they're my inner circle. And they can call me out on stuff. They can tell me when I'm wrong. They can tell me when other people are benefiting from my dysfunction, which happens because, as you said, Zeus, you were talking about how you just get busy. And I think that sometimes we mask strength, or we try to we mask our pain or our dysfunction as strength because we carry on, and you're acting like a hero, and someone's benefiting from that. But meanwhile, it's killing you. Your car is dying, but you got where you said you were gonna go, and it's like, at what cost? The only way that stops, if you're truly blind to it, is who you let in your front seat.
That's fantastic. And I think that ties beautifully into this point about access. I just love that Lysa used a number scale.
Yeah.
That sometimes we are given level 10 access to people who have only demonstrated level 3 responsibility.
Right.
So let me help everybody who's watching today. If you want to be a level 10 friend, you got to be the kind of friend who can get in the passenger seat and say, you know your check engine light is on, right?
Right. And say it the right way.
And say it the right way.
That's it.
To be able to say it right way. Zeus, can you maybe talk a little bit about the responsibility? I went back and forth in my mind whether or not I was going to share this story, but I think I am.
Here we go.
We were standing in the lobby at UC when we both were working at UC one day.
By the way, in case y'all didn't know, Will and I used to be at the University City campus.
Yeah.
And now we're can't get away from each other.
Chet's life is significantly less stressed. We were standing in the lobby together, and I came over to you and Ked, and I was like, hey, there's a woman here who's a little too friendly with me.
Oh.
I'm just gonna stand there because I don't know where my wife is. I'm gonna stand here with y'all until my wife appears. I've texted her already and all of that. Can you talk about the friend you've been to me since that moment?
Yeah.
And I think that'll help provide some clarity for the people who are watching.
Yes.
On what it means to be a level 10 friend. I think sometimes we're so busy trying to figure out who's a level 10 friend to me.
Yeah.
Who can I give access level 10 to, that we oftentimes forget we need to be the kind of friend.
Yes.
Can you talk about maybe what that responsibility has been for you in my life in the years that we've known one another?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I appreciate that, Will, and I can definitely say the same thing because you've been that same friend for me in so many different spaces, both personal and professional. I think there is a level of weight that when someone gives you access, right? Be it a spouse, be it a friend, maybe you're someone on your team that now opens up with you, because that's what you did. You gave me access.
Yes.
What am I doing with that?
Great.
I think it's super, super important. And so to maybe continue this car analogy, you need some people in your life that have either been through some things, that have a level of experience. And so let me use this as an analogy. I get in the car with a friend of mine. This is a couple of years ago. I get in the car with a friend of mine. I've been driving my car. It's fine. Now, if you're the type of person, like I'm the type of person that when I'm in the car, I'm driving that thing volume all the way up, okay? So I don't hear the dysfunction in my car. And so like anytime, I'm doing that. But then I had a friend of mine that's in the car, and I had the volume down, and he heard something that I didn't even know to hear.
Wow.
Because he knew.
Wow.
And he had been in that position beforehand.
Wow.
And he said, hey, that doesn't sound right.
Wow.
Right.
That's like, there's something weird. There's like, what are you talking about? That happens all the time. So I was so used to it, or perhaps I didn't even know to, you know what I mean? And so having him in the passenger seat with me, where he was able to call something out, you know what I mean? And again, it all comes down to, there was a level of trust.
Yes.
Right.
There was a level of access. There was a level of, you know what I mean, relatability that we were able to connect of like, hey, like, let me, like, let's work through this together. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And so who you let in is everything. At the end of the day, who you give access to. But then on the other side of it, there are some people that have been given, like you've been given access to some people.
Absolutely.
And there is a level of stewardship that is important,
Beautiful.
you know what I mean?
Beautiful.
As friends, you know what I mean? As be it a coworker, be it a spouse, to cover them.
Absolutely.
To love on them.
Absolutely.
To be with them. Even something as simple as, I'm gonna shut up and just hear you out.
Yeah.
You wanna talk about being responsible? Being responsible with some of that access doesn't mean you have a Bible verse in your all the time. Hey, this is what the Bible says. Sometimes it's shutting up and, hey, I'm gonna hear with you. I'm gonna listen with you. And I'm gonna process this with you together.
And to not steward well is a dysfunction.
Exactly.
Right? To go, like you said earlier, I'm just gonna make myself busy is a dysfunction. But Lysa talks specifically about a dysfunction. I can't wait to hear what Tay is gonna say about this, because this is part of Taylor's testimony. She gets into this.
Here we go.
This dysfunction. I told you I was gonna do it too. She talks about the dysfunction of over-explaining. She uses this quote. She says, children explain.
Adults inform.
Adults inform. Tay, talk about the dysfunction of, I'm picking on Tay a little bit, but Taylor's one of my closest friends, and it's fantastic. And she has been, I don't know if y'all know this or not, Taylor leads our college and young adult ministry at University City, which is exploding right now and is experiencing all kinds of, it really is a revival that's taking place. And she's been so open. I've been extremely proud of her vulnerability, appropriate level of vulnerability with the people she leads, talking about the dysfunction of over-explaining and the practical steps you've had to take in your own life, personally, professionally, and everything in between to break that dysfunction. Talk a little bit about the over-explaining part.
I've been on a journey, especially over the summer, but growing up as like a middle child, I always wanted to like please my parents.
Sure.
So I naturally over-explain, like this is why I did this, I'm trying to do this. And so it wasn't until this year, I'm now 29, about to be 30,
okay.
That I finally set some boundaries as an adult to let my parents know, like, this is what's going to happen, and packaging it in a way that's caring and loving, because I have to set that boundary.
Right.
Because I've been living a life of trying to prove myself to my parents, and I feel like there's some people in the chat that they feel shameful for setting a boundary, right?
Yeah.
And it's not a bad thing, right? As long as you do it in love and care, right? But at the end of the day, it comes down to you and God.
Sure.
And so that's the journey I've been on with God, like setting a boundary because I have to.
Yeah.
And He's the only person I report to
That's
at the
fantastic.
end of the day. Like,
That's fantastic.
God gave me my parents, but God comes first.
I love that you talked about parenting and that relationship with your parents, because Lysa in the sermon tells the story about the scuba diving story.
Yeah.
And they're floating and they don't get down to the right part and all the different things. The whole gist of the story, though, she shares is she gets back up and the scuba instructor says, you took your eyes off the master.
Right.
You took your eyes off the master.
My God.
You took your eyes off the master.
Right.
Yep.
And I love that you talked about parenting, because now I'm going to ask Stephanie a parenting
Oh,
question.
jeez.
You've got teenagers living in your home,
I have one, yeah.
which is a spirit all in.
Let me tell you.
Okay.
Let me tell you. Actually, she turned 14 on Monday. My girl turned 14 on Monday.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, I know.
Talk about how you've had to keep your eyes on the master.
Oh,
And what for a lot of people can be, I'm joking about this, but I love watching your relationship with your daughter.
Thank you.
Because it is not a dysfunctional relationship.
No.
And for so many people, we learn the behaviors and patterns of dysfunctional relationships in our teenage years with our parents. And I
Right.
have watched you and your husband be intentional that you won't have dysfunctional relationships with your kids. Talk about the importance of keeping your eyes on the master while trying to raise a 14-year-old.
I mean, I've been very honest with my daughter. There are certain things that I've said to her. Guess what? When I was 14, there was no social media. It didn't exist. So I don't know the proper way to do this.
So good.
I am keeping my eyes on the master.
So good.
Yeah.
And what I understand is that 24-hour-a-day access to you, no one deserves. And so let me explain. And if I am wrong, then I will apologize when you're older. But I'd rather be wrong in protecting you than wrong in letting you go too far into a world that
My
I
God.
don't trust. Because I do trust you,
Sure.
but I don't trust everything else.
Right.
Sure.
And so I think honesty is a big piece of it.
Right.
And honestly explaining that, like, I have prayed about this and here are some reasons in the Bible that I think we need to, and I look for like core values, right? And so what are we trying to build in her? She's 14. So at this point, I need her to be confident.
That's right.
Yeah.
I need her to extend grace to other people.
right.
And so when certain things come up and she comes home with little drama stories from school, this girl said this girl looked at me like that, then well, blah, 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 then I will reinstill those values in the conversation.
Yeah.
And if she really pushes me, I'm like, okay, well, you can go to your room and you can look up go to the end of the Bible in the concordance and look up the word grace, because you need to give some to somebody and see what the Lord says about it.
My God.
So I'm trying to teach her, but then I'm also trying to show her how to have her own relationship with the Lord.
So great stuff.
And she's done a few things where I have said, and this has terrified her, I'm like, you don't need to be afraid of me, because this is my house, this is my life that I have built, that you have your own relationship with God.
Yeah.
right.
He will deal with you, or you will deal with whatever consequences
Fantastic.
come, and I will be here to love you and back you up, but
Fantastic.
some lessons you will learn on your own.
Yeah.
And I don't say that to be mean, I say that to tell her, like, that's the reality
Absolutely.
of what you're gonna face. So yeah, I mean, it's hard.
I love what you said, though. I'd rather be wrong in protecting you
Yes,
than wrong in letting you go. That is a boundary.
it is.
That is a boundary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it has to be adjusted as they grow.
Okay, this is what I was going to ask you next.
Okay.
Talk a little bit. We're coming close to our end here, but talk a little bit about how boundaries are not set to be permanent forever.
No, they are not.
But then most of our relationships, we're talking about you to your daughter, but in your marriage and your friendships at work, boundaries, you're gonna have to constantly reevaluate.
Yes.
Where's
As
this
the
boundary?
person grows.
Absolutely.
And so in parenting, your boundaries for your 18-month-old should look very different than your boundaries for your 14-year-old,
Sure.
right? I have a 6-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 14-year-old. They have very different rules.
Sure.
They go to bed at different times.
Yes.
And it's because of where they are in their maturity or how their bodies react to things. Like, I know the one can't have more sugar. It's just, it's what it is, because you know which kid reacts in which way.
Absolutely.
And I have to constantly reevaluate, because my rule up to this point has been no social media.
Sure.
But maybe when she's 16, it changes. It depends on the maturity that I see.
Sure.
So now take that principle and apply it to other areas of your life.
That's great.
Right? Like maybe you've been hurt by somebody in the past. Maybe they've exhibited certain levels of behavior. But part of healing is being able to accept that, like, Jesus changes people.
Yes.
And if that happens and you continue to behave in the same way, then it's just, there's no growth, there's no forgiveness.
Sure.
I don't want to be accused at the end and stand before God and have him say that I judged somebody too harshly.
Sure.
And so there's got to be healing in that. It's adjustable boundaries in parenting, but in other relationships, I think that part of it is acknowledging a healing.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
That's great.
What ends up happening, though, you kept saying this word that I think is pivotal in the conversation of boundaries, and that's maturity.
That's
Yes.
And the more you mature, the higher level of access you're granted.
Yeah.
And I want to encourage whoever's watching today, maybe there's a boundary God has set before you.
Yeah.
Maybe he has sent friends and family and coworkers to remind you of a boundary he has set in place for you. And you're like, God, I don't want this to be a boundary anymore. God, I don't want this to be a boundary anymore. God, I don't want this to be a boundary anymore. Stephanie just gave you, the Lord just spoke to you through Stephanie.
Okay. Listen.
You want that boundary to be adjusted, it is going to require
Absolutely.
maturity.
Yeah.
It is going to require maturity. If you're saying, God, there's this person I love so much in my life, but I can't continue to grant them level 10 access and have exhibited level 3 behavior, maturity is going to be what is required for you to set that boundary. If not, you will consistently continue to dance with dysfunction. And I don't know about you, I've done enough dysfunctional dancing.
Listen.
I done the cha-cha slide, the electric slide. I've been doing salsa, bachata, I've done all of it. I've had enough dancing with dysfunction. I've done enough dancing.
Educate the people.
I've done enough dancing with dysfunction that I'm at a point in my life where I'm like, I'd rather set healthy boundaries.
That's it.
Because there's a freedom that I get to experience within the healthy boundaries that we get to set. Thank you so much, Lysa, again, for this word.
Yes.
It is on our Elevation Church YouTube. I encourage you to go back and watch it. I saw a bunch of people putting in the chat that they've had to watch it multiple times. That makes sense for a sermon
and read
like
the
this.
book. The book gives a lot more, because it takes hours to listen to or read the book. There's just more to it.
Yeah.
It's such a great resource for you. I hope this has been encouraging for you. We are looking forward to seeing you at church. Tay said it earlier, some of y'all signed up for your group, you ain't been yet.
Nope.
So take this
Go to
week,
your group.
just go to your group. Riverside, California, we cannot wait to see you this weekend. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, and we'll see you guys this weekend for church.